Time to talk some shit, motherfucker. Power movement.
Welcome to the Powell Movement. I'm your host, Mike Powell, and this week, like every week since we've been on lockdown, I'm going to start the show with more talking than normal, because obviously, shit is not normal. If you're a regular listener, you've heard me complain about seeing way too many people at the beach here in Seattle, and thinking to myself, well, all of those idiots are going to get sick and some will die. I'm not sure I'm totally wrong about that. Some of those people will get sick and some will die. But that was 2 weeks ago. And while some folks didn't change their behaviors, most of us stayed the fuck home. And based on the numbers here in Seattle, it looks like it's working. I mean, I'm no scientist, and like most of you, all I have is an opinion formulated by the media I consume and my own personal beliefs. But what is being reported is that Seattle hasn't exploded like it was predicted to happen. So maybe this whole flattening the curve thing really works like the scientists are saying. And with this whole thing, I would think everyone would have a similar outlook. That we as a country totally blew it on handling this pandemic and that lives will be lost because of that. But not all of us have that belief. I've been having a bunch of conversations with my dad lately. He recently had his knee replaced and I wanted to make sure he was good. When this whole thing started out, I would call him up and this whole pandemic was no big deal to him. He compared it to the flu and said that he was worried about us here in Seattle, but he didn't need to worry because it's not a problem in Florida. And if it does become a problem, he won't die because this thing only kills old people and people with underlying health issues. I kept trying to tell my dad that that was not the case. It was anyone with an underlying health condition and old people. And he's an old person, but I don't think that ever registered with him. The second time I talked to him about this, about a week later, Seattle is still a hot spot, and my dad is convinced that in a couple days, the whole country will be able to be tested. He's telling me that 2 days from now, you'll have a drive-through testing area, and he is sure of this. So I give it a few days, give him a call back. We're still not able to get tested here in Seattle. And I ask him how the testing's going over in Florida. He's not really sure of that. All he knows is that while the numbers on the East Coast are starting to grow, it's still not in Florida and it's not that big of a deal. My dad's only going to go to physical therapy 3 times a week and to the grocery store twice a week, and he should be fine. Our conversation continues, and I mentioned to my dad that the country didn't handle this thing well. And he reacts with a more, what are you talking about tone? He's actually pretty stoked on the way our country is handling this. He's like, Michael, it's not that bad. We have 2,000 cases here in Florida. They're not even on my coast yet. Fast forward another week and Florida is finally on the shutdown list. I call my dad to continue the conversation and see how things are going since Florida became a hot spot. I thought he would think it was a bigger deal. And he does. Now he's staying home a little bit, but it's more because of his knee replacement. If he didn't have his knee replacement, I'm sure he would be out flying, because that's what he likes to do with his free time. On the last call I had with my dad, he said that while Florida has like 15,000 cases, they are still all on the other coast. There are only 60 cases in Sarasota, according to my dad, and they have 140 beds in the ICU, and only 34 are being used. That's my dad, and I love him. I just can't understand how he or anyone else can think we did a good job at managing this one, but whatever. I hope he doesn't get it. And if this sickness isn't scary enough for everyone, there are going to be a ton of folks impacted by this thing. In snow, mountains are closed, a shit ton of people are out of work, and a lot of those people are really going to be hurting. When I lived in a resort town, I had a few $100 in the bank at all times. That's how you lived, paycheck to paycheck. If I missed one paycheck cycle, I would have been screwed. And there are a lot of people in resort towns that are going to be fucked by this. Not just resort towns, but I'm talking about the industry. I'm sure the government is going to try to give them money, which is nice, but who knows if it'll be there in time. I know people want to eat today. So that's the resort employees. Then you have the retailers, who, if they don't have a strong enough online business, they are going to be screwed as well. At the brands, people will be furloughed, development will be cut as fast as retailers are cutting orders, athletes will lose sponsors, so will podcasters, and who knows what will happen to print. And that's just our little bubble of the snow world. This is happening everywhere. So while it sucks to be at home and it sucks worse for some people, I have no idea where I'm going with this little rant, so I'm going to end it and intro my awesome guest this week. I've been talking to Pat Moore about doing a podcast forever, and this winter has been so busy that there really hasn't been time. And it's not like he's been blowing me off. Pat consistently gets back to me to let me know that we have to change a date based on this trip or that trip. And that's how things should be during snow season. While I wish I was still chasing Pat and he was still chasing winter, all of that has changed, and Pat's time was wide open for a podcast. I'm not going to spoil the podcast by giving anything away, but I am going to give something away. One of Pat Moore's snowboards. Well, one at the K2 office that marketing guru Tom Johnson was so nice to give away. Here is the deal. Follow K2 Snowboarding and the Powell Movement on Instagram, and then tag the Pat Moore post that I'll put up on Monday with 2 friends who would like the podcast, and you're entered to win a 2021 157 K2 party platter. I'll pick a winner on Friday, and the board will ship in June. That's the contest. I also need to thank Andy over at 10 Barrel for sending me some more Profuse juice and Smash. Andy, you may have just saved my life by keeping me away from the grocery store. That's enough about me. Before I get into the show, I want to ask you to do a few things for me. First, I want to ask you to subscribe to the podcast wherever you listen to me and follow me on Instagram at The Powell Movement. Finally, I want to ask you to please support my great sponsors who make this thing happen. They are Evo, Stanley, 686, and the 10 Barrel Brewery. Now, let's talk with Pat Moore. We've been trying to do this thing since like October, I feel like, but it takes a global pandemic to make it happen. How are you handling the pandemic?
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of, I don't know, putting us on our ass. We're taking it fairly seriously. We're locked up in our house and we got a bunch of good food and just been cooking by ourselves and kind of doing our own thing. So just trying to be somewhat responsible, you know. It's crazy though. I would have never had guessed that we would have something like this happen in our lifetimes, you know.
Totally. And it all happened. I mean, given we were talking about it here and there for a couple months, but it seemed like within 5 days, it was a hard stop on life. And where were you when it all happened? Were you out on a trip?
Yeah, I was up in Whistler, just doing some filming with Bo Bishop. And just kind of on my drive up, I was planning on going up and spending the second half of March and April in Whistler. And as I was driving up, the news just kind of started to break about the European travel restrictions coming, you know, to the US and all these different things. So we just kind of kept an eye on it. I still went to Whistler and we filmed. We actually had a few good days up there, but I got down from filming one day and my wife just called and was like, get across the border tonight. I don't want you stuck up there and me having to deal with this by myself. So I drove across the border late at night and just stayed in my truck in Bellingham and then just finished the drive the next day.
So everything's on a hard stop for you. What do you think it does for the industry? Because at this point, everybody's got orders in for new products in factories in China that I'm sure are not producing product. And what do you think is going to happen, like the fallout for next season? Do you have any idea?
I mean, I'm optimistic for next season. You know, I would love to see this kind of pass through and by the end of summer, hopefully we're back to normal. But the economic impact of this whole thing is going to be massive. We are here in South Lake Tahoe and pretty much everybody in the basin is getting laid off. All the ski resorts, all the stores, all the restaurants, the casinos. So it's a massive blow. And this is like a little micro economy up here. And if you look at it on like a global scale, the layoffs and everything that are happening right now, yeah, it's going to be interesting times to see how this ripple effect really affects our economy.
Yeah, it's going to be crazy. It already is crazy, but we'll stop talking about crazy times and we'll go into a nice, wholesome place, which is your childhood. You're from Holderness, New Hampshire. And do you have any brothers or sisters?
Yeah, I have 2 brothers. My older brother, he's in Minneapolis now, or in St. Paul. He's there with his family. And my younger brother is just finishing school at McGill up in Montreal. So yeah, we got a couple bros. And yeah, I grew up in Holderness. My mom was the marketing director at Waterville Valley. So that was my start, was just Waterville was my babysitter for the most part. She would go to work, drop me off, and I would hang out all day.
You know, and in all the things I've read about you, there's a ton about your mom because she is like the badass at Waterville. But one thing I never read anything about is your dad. And is he in the picture?
Yeah, definitely. My dad owns his own business. That's in Holderness. It's a campground and restaurant, burger shack, ice cream parlor, and boat rental. So he's super busy in the summer times, like pinned all summer. And in the winter, he basically has winters off. So he does a ton of skiing. Back when he was younger, he ski raced. So he traveled around to a lot of the same places that I go to now, which is pretty cool.
Yeah.
And yeah, actually nowadays his winters are in Salt Lake City and he ski coaches at Snowbird.
Oh, sick.
Yeah. So yeah, both of them were super involved with my snowboarding and giving me that opportunity. I think my mom just gets a lot of the credit. Just, she was the one at Waterville. Everybody went to her for lift tickets, events. She was definitely the point person that really created a pretty big culture of snowboarding on the East Coast, specifically for New Hampshire.
Yeah, I think when you look at Waterville, it has a history of being ahead of the curve with what's cool. It started back in the 70s with the first hot dog contest ever, I think, was at Waterville. And then over the years, things have gotten stale. When the 90s come around, it's a pivotal time for Waterville because they need to bring the youth back to the mountain. Your mom's leading the charge. Does she look to you and your friends at some point to see how to reinvigorate the mountain, or is that something that she comes up on her own, just looking at the marketplace?
I think my mom's just always been pretty intuitive and recognizes the different trends that are happening. But yeah, Waterville was the birthplace of freestyle skiing, and maybe with that same energy and spirit opened its arms to snowboarding at a pretty early age. I know some of the late 80s halfpipe contests were happening at Snows Mountain. One of the first hard dug halfpipe dug into the dirt was there. And I would say when I was around probably 8 or 9 was when resorts started investing into snowboard parks.
And that's when you start, right?
Yeah, and that's when I started. So I definitely had an amazing opportunity when I first got started to get right into riding park. And yeah, there's a lot of progression happening right at that time.
Given when you're 9 years old, I'm sure you're not getting any input. But when you get a little older, are you able to give your mom input into what the park needs to be and kind of manicure that to your style and what you like to do?
No. But she was always really good as a manager. She was a director, but she wasn't micromanaging people. So Mike Patera, who was our snowboard coach for a long time and then ended up being the terrain park manager there, building the parks for Waterville, he was kind of free to do what he wanted. And he was a very smart person himself and knew what type of terrain to build and what sort of jumps and features that the kids wanted to ride. And he had the blank canvas to build on. So definitely have to give Mike a ton of credit for all of us for giving us a home to go and snowboard and have a place to be ourselves,
Yeah. And I think your snowboarding kind of ramps up. I think you get coaching. You have Bill Enos, who's a badass snowboard coach as it is, but he's the director of Waterville Academy. And how does a dude like that help you in snowboarding when you're so young and still keep it really fun?
Well, Bill's one of a kind. That's for sure. Anybody who has ever met him or spent time with him, you can't do anything with him without having fun. He's just so charismatic and so young. He's just a goofball. So traveling with him and just being with him every single day felt super youthful. So he always kept it fun. But his background in snowboard racing and his knowledge of the technical side of snowboarding and how you turn and how that translates into jumping and landing and riding halfpipe made a huge difference for a lot of us. And it's not just him. If you look across the border over to Vermont, Bud Keane was a very similar type of coach.
Yep.
And the riders that came out of Stowe at that time, Jake Blauvelt, Kennedy, Zach Leach, all these guys had incredible talent, just the board control that they had. And a lot of that came from Bud and Bill just really understanding how snowboarding works.
It's pretty funny because I talk to a lot of skiers as well, and I've watched skiing and snowboarding forever, and I look at the best skiers out there as the ones who had that race background, even though they might have hated it. When they raced from 6 to 12 years old, just their foundation on skis is above and beyond anybody else. And it sounds like the coaches between Bud and Vermont and Bill with you guys, their knowledge of racing just gives you a foundation that most kids aren't ever going to get in snowboarding because no one thinks about racing anymore.
Yeah, Definitely. I'm sure a lot of those techniques are being used for all the coaching that's happening nowadays, looking across the board with how big the Olympics are and everything like that. But for back then, looking at the transition from how park riding was in the late 90s, wide stances, 0-0 angles, short boards, lunch tray style snowboards. They weren't very functional. So it was a super cool time in snowboarding, but I think a lot of the technology that kind of came from understanding turning and racing and things like that progressed snowboarding in a big way in that turning point of kind of the early 2000s.
And in the late 90s, I'd say, maybe not the late, like mid 90s-ish, your grom phase. Videos like Simple Pleasures, Decade, Technical Difficulties. Is that how you're spending your time, just watching VHS tapes until they run out?
Yeah, it probably wasn't until like the late 90s that I really got into watching videos. Probably my first video was Far East, which was really cool because I could watch that. And then a lot of the guys that would come through Waterville were in that video. So it really made this kind of pro snowboarder a very tangible thing because I saw them in the videos and then I could see them at the park every once in a while. Just looking back, it was a really cool chance. It wasn't just a guy on the screen that was a total superstar. But, then as I got more and more into it, the forum team just like blew my mind. Watching Simple Pleasures, Technical Difficulties, True Life, Resistance, as a group, we watched True Life and Resistance until the VHS tape broke.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So we were obsessed for a while there. And, we had our favorite rider and we dressed like them and tried to act like them.
Who are you?
I was definitely JP. I idolized him and Nate Bozung, and I wanted to be them 100%. I also loved Peter Line and Bjorn. I don't know, I guess really all of them. I remember specifically buying a puffy vest to look like JP, or riding my board a certain way, or doing certain tricks like Peter Line, or at least trying to, like those guys had a massive influence. But during that time too, I was a bit of like a pipe jock. So I would travel around to a lot of half pipe contests and I was doing somewhat well in those at a young age. So I also had this whole other group of heroes that I was looking up to, like Danny Cass and Ross Powers and that whole era of half pipe riding.
I was living in Vail at the time that the Forum 8 were coming up, and I was snowboarding every day back then, working in a shop. And while Burton was always a bestseller, the Forum 8 was all that mattered in snowboarding, it seemed like. I mean, those guys set the trends and changed the game, and everybody wanted to be like them. It sounds like that's how you and your crew was. Who was your crew at Waterville?
Let's see. The main crew was Danny Garrity, Chaz Goldemond, Avert Goldemond, Tyler Davis, James Brumfield, Greg Maxwell, Matt Cohen. A lot of those names you've probably heard of through either contests, like Chaz Goldemond or Alterna Films. Greg and Danny went off to do some rad stuff. So out of our group, there's quite a few people who utilize snowboarding to travel and film and kind of have a career.
Okay. I know Avert a little bit, Chaz's brother. I was always trying to get him to introduce me to Chaz, and he never did. He was kind of standoffish to me, and I don't understand because he's friends with me. But I don't know Chaz at all. But with a name like that, knowing his little brother a little bit, this is a really wild assumption I'm going to make, but I'm guessing his personality wasn't one that was too conducive to sponsors, because based on results, that dude should have been a way bigger name, but he wasn't. And why was that?
Oof.
Tough one, sorry.
That's a tough one. I don't know. I mean, first of all, the Goldemonds are incredible. The whole family is basically a second family to me. So growing up with Chaz and Avert was such an amazing time. Both super talented at snowboarding. They are the ones that got me into skateboarding too, and music and all sorts of stuff. So they were definitely a huge part of my life and still are. But yeah, with Chaz, he had a good run with DC for a while there, and it's really hard to say. Unfortunately, I think that contest riders don't get the love and attention that they necessarily deserve.
Every 4 years they do.
Yeah, every 4 years for sure. But I think Chaz, when he got the most credit was when he was doing well in contests, but mainly when he had video parts with standard. So yeah, I kind of go back to what I was saying, like the contest riders don't always get that appreciation that they deserve. And it's not until they're out filming and having video parts come out all the time that they get these kind of bigger sponsorships. But I don't know how to answer your question.
Fair enough.
That's a tough one.
Yeah. But we'll go back to the whole crew thing with like the Forum 8, because over time it seems like the team concept of that and the team being bigger than the riders, that kind of has disappeared, I feel like. I mean, there are no legendary teams like the Forum team this day and age, and that type of marketing is gone. It seems like it's all about the individual rider and personal projects. When did you notice that trend start happening?
Really, when social media took over, because it became less about the group and more about the individual. But for me, what I love to see is that there is still marketing out there and still team videos.
You're filming one for Vans, right?
Yeah, with Vans. Burton's out there filming one this year, which will be a great tribute to Jake. I think DC's been good about that. They've been putting out edits as a team pretty consistently for the last few years. So I still see it, but I do agree with you. It's more about the individual. And I think a lot of that has to do with social media and also just how you gather your video parts now. A lot more people are trying to hire their own filmer or kind of create their own project, mainly because you can control that footage and that content easier than if you are filming for a project that once you've landed the trick, the footage is in somebody else's hand. So I think that sponsors enjoy owning that footage 100% rather than paying into a group video like a MacDog or a Standard used to do and not have control over that footage after the project's said and done.
And we'll talk about your current sponsors later, but one quick thing about the team video. You're on K2 now, and with K2, you guys have had a lot of big signings over the past month and a half, I feel like. Sage is on the program, and you guys picked somebody else up too, I think.
Well, we have Gabe Ferguson, Sage.
Jake's on the team still?
Oh, yeah. I mean, the original team from when I got on, Jody, Belzil, Jake, Leanne, I know I'm blank, the Eddies. The team was incredible already. So just all these additions are just making it better and better. It's pretty cool. I'd say one of the most exciting parts about the team right now is just really seeing the creative part of it come to life. You know, I think Tommy J has done a great job hiring Mark O'Malley and Seamus to create edits and shoot photos, and they do amazing work. And then also with that, the addition of the whole AM team, the Dustbox crew, has been incredible. Noah, Robbie, Dan, all those guys are really just, they're going to be the next guys, the next crew. So it's cool to see them a part of this family.
And in thinking of it, you guys are in position to have that banger team video come out again. If K2 were to say, hey, all these new guys plus all the guys that we've had, and that's like a A-list video right there. Now it is time for me to take my first sponsor break. And my first sponsor is Evo. And while Evo's retail locations are closed for distancing, don't worry. If you haven't been to evo.com lately, you are missing out on the best deals on the internet. Evo is the first website to focus on the digital space in action sports, and they do it better than anyone else. They have all the brands, all the products, and the resources and customer service to make sure you get what you need. If that's not enough, Evo offers free shipping on orders over $50, a low price guarantee, and a hassle-free return policy. And I have a special deal for you. Shop for any Evo branded product that is as good or better than the big brand stuff, and when you check out, use the code POWEL20 and you will save 20% on your entire order. Evo gives a percentage of sales back to local charities, and right now, that is more important than ever. My next sponsor is 686. They have been the independent outerwear brand in snow since 1992, and they make the best gear on the planet. That's no bullshit. My 686 Glacier jacket is the best jacket I've ever owned, and it comes with a lifetime guarantee. The whole Glacier series does. And since 686 shipped me a pair of Everywhere pants, I've lived in them. They're so comfortable, and like all 686 products, there's so much attention paid to the pocket style and detail. Let's be honest. Times aren't great out there right now for a lot of things, but it happens to be the greatest time ever to get your hands on some 686 outerwear. Starting today at 686.com is the sale of all sales. So head on over to the website and get 40% off all Gore-Tex styles and most apparel site-wide. Those are some of my great sponsors. Now let's jump back into the podcast. Before you're on K2, before you're on anyone, you get picked up like every other East Coast kid by Burton, and you're a pipe rider, and that's what you're known for. And how does the whole Burton thing come together?
At that time, Chris Copley and his business, Chris Copley was the Burton rep on the East Coast. He had a massive business. I would say that Copley Consolidated back in those days was probably bigger than like major snowboard brands are these days.
He's making a lot of money.
Yeah, his company was. And with that, he had a lot of team riders, just like any other company would. So as a rep, he had this incredible rep force that was all around the East Coast and picking up riders and flowing them product. And they picked me up. I think I was 12 or 13, rode for them for a few years, and they gave me a ton of opportunities, and that was huge. It was funny, the last podcast that I did, I said that Copley was my very first sponsor, and then my buddy called me out. It was actually Mark Wakeling, who was the Oakley rep on the East Coast. And yeah, he came through big time. You know, back then to go buy a pair of like A-frames was crazy. You know, they were $150 or whatever. And then the lenses were expensive too. So when we first started getting hooked up with goggles, that was huge.
So Oakley's your first sponsor ever?
Yeah.
And a few years later, you head to Hood, you enter the Forum Youngblood comp, and you end up getting second in that contest. Is that how things start falling into place with Forum?
Yeah, basically, I just happened to be at the first Youngblood contest, and I think that for them, it was their very first one, so they brought up some team riders. Bjorn was there. Ricky Melnick, who was the team manager at the time, was there, and I got second to Zach Marbin, but he was already on the team. And basically, Ricky offered me a spot on this new Youngblood team that they were about to create. And it was myself, Marbin, Travis Kennedy, Jake Blauvelt. I don't know if Louis Vito was on there yet, but he was on not too far afterwards. So it was this pretty incredible young group of riders. So when that opportunity fell into my lap, I just had to take it.
I recently talked to Jake Blauvelt, and he was stoked to be part of that Forum crew as well, but he was on Burton just like you. And when he told the Burton guys that he was going to go over and get on Forum, they told him he was ruining his career. Did you hear the same shit?
Yep. Yeah, totally. But that's, you know, looking back on that, I can't say anything negative about the Burton crew at that time. Like, they did so much for us, and them saying that to us, you know, they probably truly believed it.
Sure.
You know, and ultimately, looking back at it now, if Burton didn't come through and buy Forum when they did, they were probably right. Forum was going out of business when Burton acquired them. So in a way, they were right.
Yeah.
It just worked out a little differently.
Yeah. Everything comes full circle. Who else are you riding for in your teens?
So, yeah, I got on Forum, and then maybe a year later, I got on to Electric. And it took a couple of years after getting onto Forum, but then I found my way onto Foursquare. So I kind of bounced around. I was on Special Blend, and then I was on the Forum outerwear, and then they wanted me on Foursquare. So 4-star distribution and then Electric. And I met Kyle Cadam because he was roommates with Ricky Melnick, and Kyle was the team manager at Electric. And I've loved that company and that whole crew ever since. It's been over 15 years now.
And we don't need to talk about school much, but do you do the whole Waterville Academy thing?
Yeah, I did it for a couple of years. Back at that time, you could sign up for individual months. So I remember I signed up, my parents helped pay for 1 month, and then I think I got a scholarship for a second. And then the next year I did 3 months. And then my senior year I did online. I only had a couple credits that I needed to do left. And I moved out to Kings Beach and Lake Tahoe with Chaz. And I did that last year of school online. Did all of the work in the very last month that it was due, and I barely got by. But that was just the one rule from my mom, is that I had to get through high school.
So you get through high school, you move out west, and is it all pretty much focusing on pipe and filming, or are you filming much at all then?
Filming a little bit. My first year in Tahoe, I had a great opportunity to film with Grenade. So I filmed with them, still doing contests, started doing fairly well, actually in slopestyle. So some opportunities came up there. And yeah, just was trying to film as much as possible. And that was really where my heart was at, was filming. And just being so much of a Forum fan back in the day, I just wanted to film and have a video part. And yeah, that was everything to me.
And your first full part, is that Video Gangs?
No, Video Gangs, I only had a couple of shots. My first full parts were probably with Iron Curtain, with John Cavan back on the East Coast. And then he ended up getting a job with Grenade as a filmer. So he helped me get in with them. And I would say my breakthrough year was when we filmed Smell the Glove, and I got opening part. Yeah, that was, I believe, the year that I moved to Tahoe. So what an opportunity to fall in your lap the first year that you move out to Tahoe, just getting thrown in with the Grenade guys. It was amazing.
And what's the difference between working with the Grenade guys and working with the Forum guys? Is it a totally different mindset and different vibe?
Definitely. Man, filming with Grenade, I feel like we were kind of on all the same level, where there wasn't really this hierarchy and everyone was working towards the same goal. And yeah, kind of starting from the same place, even though we were all from very different ages and places.
Forum had its rock stars that were definitely going to get more, and then it was you guys?
Well, with Forum, there was just a lot more stress. When we started to film for that, we had meetings before the video even started, and basically Kearns, who is the director, laid out kind of these rules of your personal best is no longer good enough. It has to be the best, like industry best.
Huh.
It was a lot of pressure. It was a lot of really getting kind of thrown in with the lions at a young age. And really, for me, I still had no idea what I was doing, especially in the backcountry. But even though it was a bit of a rougher program, it was a huge learning opportunity and definitely gained a lot from it.
And how about urban? And that's part of your game as well. When does that all start for you? Because you really, I mean, if you look at your career from gnarly street stuff to Alaska and everywhere in between, you're comfortable with it, even half pipe.
Yeah, I guess. To be honest, I've never really gotten Alaska that good. I've only been up there a couple of times and feel like I've flailed pretty good. But street stuff, yeah, that was a huge part, especially in my younger years, just growing up in New Hampshire, you know, being that Forum fan. We started hitting street stuff around New Hampshire and all around the East Coast when we were in high school, and that continued on up until really a couple of years ago. I haven't been hitting street stuff for a few years now, but it definitely was a huge part of my career, or whatever you want to call it.
Are you that kid when you're in high school, whenever you're in the car, you're looking around, looking for handrails and looking for features and pointing shit out like, we've got to hit that, we've got to get that? Is that you?
Oh, 100%. That's still me. I still will drive around, and if I notice a spot, I'll pull over and check it out. And I think that's just a part of it, which is really cool. It changes your potentially mundane world, and it creates a skate park in your brain wherever you're driving around.
Totally. Well, back to you're on Forum, and in about 2004, we talked a little bit about it, but Burton buys Forum. And while Forum's not doing well at all, do you see the Burton acquisition coming at all?
No, that was really out of the blue. We were all at Hood. Forum had rented a house, and the whole team was there like it used to be, and just riding together. And one morning, Jenna Richard, our team manager, just kind of sat us down and broke the news to us. And literally that night, there was a Burton photo shoot at High Cascade in the park, and they invited the whole Forum team up there to ride with them. And it was just this weird mix of all of a sudden we had a big brother. But the Burton acquisition, it saved Forum, and it definitely was a good thing for our careers. They treated us really well for, it was about 10 years that they owned Forum, and they gave us free reign to do whatever we wanted. And it was pretty amazing times. So even though when the news broke that Burton was buying us and we all thought we were going to get dropped and all this stuff, the future kind of really opened up for us because of that.
But when you're in that room and you get that news and you're with the whole team, what is being said in that room when you hear it? I mean, is it just silence? Are you guys pissed or just confused?
Yeah, confused. We were too young and didn't really know what it meant. It took me a little while to understand it, but it was a huge compliment really from Burton to Forum that they thought it was a worthwhile investment and that they thought that they would gain market share by owning another brand that had such a strong footprint in the industry. But that took me a while to understand. To be honest, when it first happened, I really just didn't really know what it meant.
Are you still as stoked on Forum once you know that Burton owns it? I mean, they're still your sponsor, but did they come more of just a sponsor instead of like that brand you want to bleed for?
No, nothing really changed. We moved offices and there was a big shuffle with the original team riders. From what I understand, the equity part of the companies and all of that. But for all of us who were young and didn't really know what was going on, we were just kind of new to the team and nothing really changed. We were still working with Jenner and we still had the same group designing our boards, and the only changes were positive ones.
Okay. And you're still competing. I think the goal in life is to get better in the backcountry. And I'm sure when you start, you suck, or at least in your mind, just trying to land in POW and ride POW. But that all works itself out. How long did it take you to get good riding in powder? And you probably are going to say you're not good even now because you're a pro and you're humble.
It really took me a while, probably 4 or 5 years of just being babysat, really like getting dragged along and slowing down the process. But after we got done filming for that, we had the opportunity to film for the outerwear brands. So there's a special blend video and then a Foursquare video. And in between these trips that we did, we were out filming. And I feel like that was a big chance for us to take everything that we learned filming from the years before and then step out on our own and start filming as our own leaders,
Yeah.
So yeah, it really took 4 or 5 years. But yeah, I listened to Belzil's interview that he did with you a couple weeks ago. And I have to agree, every year there's this learning curve. And at the beginning, it kind of feels like you don't know what you're doing.
But you also have the other side of your career in contests. You get first in the Abominable Snow Jam in 2006. And that puts you on a track to do a whole lot more in competitions if you want to. Were there ever any Olympic dreams or aspirations for you?
Yeah, so after the Abominable Snow Jam, I basically was approached by the U.S. team, and they said if I want to potentially go for like the Olympics or anything, here are some of the criteria that I need to do that upcoming summer. So I went to Chile and did a couple contests so then I could get my points. But once winter hit, we were filming for that. And then I would go to the half pipe contests, and I just didn't have the skills or the heart to do both. I was so focused on filming. I would go to these half pipe contests and I wouldn't even make finals. So it was just a pipe dream.
You got to go all in if you're going to make the Olympic team.
Yeah, I'd say so. And respect to all those guys and girls who dedicate a massive amount of time to that one contest. For me, I just found a lot more enjoyment out of filming and that feeling of like a job well done when you had a solid video part and it was a lasting thing instead of a event that people forget about a couple of days later. Not that you forget about the Olympics or anything like that, but for me, that was kind of the mindset of it.
I would argue that I think the feeling of standing on the Olympic podium with a gold medal in your hand is probably a better feeling than having a video part, but only one person gets to do that. A lot of people get to have video parts.
Totally. Yeah. And I was not going to be that person. So I learned that and just chose the better option for me. But yeah, I mean, if you were to ask Sage or Red or, somebody else who's actually been there and who have done both, done the video parts and won an Olympic gold, they're a better person to ask than me. I'm just a kook.
I'll get one of them on and ask that question.
Yeah.
They would know.
Yep.
There are plenty of video highlights, Forever being one of them, but I think 2011 or 10-11 Vacation, it kind of shows the best of both worlds for you. You have two parts. One's all street hammers of like just hammers, and then a second whole backcountry part, and it just shows you can do everything. It's all Lemmy, Maiden. It's like 7 minutes, which is ridiculous. And when you look at your parts, is that one that you're most proud of?
Yeah, I would say Vacation is probably, it was a highlight, definitely, especially within the Forum years. I had this goal forever to film every aspect of snowboarding. So street, backcountry, park, and pipe. And I never quite did it, which I've always been pissed about. But that year, I feel like I gave it my best shot and definitely proud of that one.
Well, I think you can do that with the K2 movie that you should pitch, that you should all make, and you can have that part that you were never able to create.
Yes.
Another project that comes out is Art of Flight. It's Travis Rice and crew. How many trips are you on for that one?
Just one trip. I was in Whistler. I had just driven there from Salt Lake. We filmed for one day, and then I got down, and Travis hit me up and said that Scotty Lego had just gotten hurt, and if I wanted to come film, there's an open spot. So I just left Whistler right away, got down there, and the very first 2 days of filming, I got the few shots that I have in the video. And then after that, we kept trying, but it was kind of towards the tail end of their Jackson trip. And then they went up to Alaska and I went back to filming with Forum. Yeah, it was an odd couple of days, but man, just having 3 shots or so in Travis's film probably did more for my career than having like an ender part in a different video. Yeah, just the amount of people that saw that video, it was massive.
Yeah, the Art of Flight changed snowboarding to the masses. I mean, everybody was talking about it, not my parents, but close to my parents, I feel like.
Yeah, definitely. That was a huge one. Can't thank Travis enough for always just giving those opportunities to me. He's a pretty incredible person.
Awesome. Well, 2012, you do Real Street for the X Games. You take bronze there. Things with your sponsors should be awesome. You've been on Forum forever now. And I'll fast forward to the fall. I think you're living with John Jackson and you getting a phone call letting you know that Burton was killing Forum. Is that another total shock to you?
Yeah, that one was like getting stabbed in the heart. That one was crazy. Just getting a phone call from Brian Knox at 8 a.m. or whatever it was, and just looking at my phone being like, oh, this isn't good. But we were just about to leave to go on tour with our video, or we had just gotten back from being on tour. So the news hit us like a ton of bricks, and it was an interesting time because basically once that news got out, I had a lot of phone calls with different opportunities to get onto different teams and stuff like that, different companies.
It's bad timing too, because this is like October. No one wants to find out they don't have a sponsor in October.
Totally, yeah. And I felt really blessed that as soon as that news came out, there were opportunities kind of knocking on my door, and that wasn't the case for everybody.
Sure.
And yeah, it was a scary time. I remember talking to Jake Welch on the phone. We had just bought new trucks and, we were kind of like balling with our Forum money, and all of a sudden it just was about to disappear, and we were like scheming, trying to figure out if we could sell our trucks and get our money back and stuff. But, those types of shakeups have been a great thing for me, just to stay grounded and stay aware that this can get shut down at any moment and that it's a really special thing.
Well, in your career, when anything happens like that, you always get something better. But like you said, it doesn't work out for everyone like that. For you, it definitely did. I mean, you go to Volcom from there, right?
Yeah.
And they're not even selling snowboards. You're on their clothing line and they're like, hey, we're going to have a couple rad dudes on our team. We're going to make some boards that no one's going to be able to buy. It's going to be really cool. And you're going to be one of them.
Yeah. Basically. Yeah, it was insane. It was a dream come true. Even when I was younger, I did ride for Volcom just for streetwear. And then to have the chance to actually like really ride for the brand and be on the outerwear and the boards and everything was huge. And with that, also getting onto Vans, my mind is still blown from just the fact that, yes, we had a great run with Forum, and when it ended, that really sucked. But the next chapter has been and was really cool. Just getting on Volcom, getting on Vans, and being a part of these legacy brands that have meant so much to me.
Now it is time for my final sponsor break, and I'm going to start things off with Stanley, the brand that has been a leader in keeping things hot and cold for over 100 years. They invented the vacuum bottle, and you've seen it so many times in your life. You know, that green bottle that kept your grandpa and your dad's coffee hot all day long? Well, Stanley still makes a bottle like that, and they work better than whatever you're using right now. The reason Stanley is the leader in hot and cold is because their product is better. I mean, they created the category and they keep innovating. But Stanley makes so much more than that iconic bottle. I personally use the water bottles and pint glasses daily, and my drinks stay hotter or colder than yours by at least an hour. You deserve that same quality. Now you can get 30% off all Stanley products by heading to their site, stanley-pmi.com, entering the code Powell and the number 30, all one word, and boom, it's that easy. My final sponsor is the 10 Barrel Brewery, and they have been brewing beer out of Bend, Oregon since 2006. And since they started brewing beer, they are committed to skiing, snowboarding, biking, and drinking beer outside. While I see a lot of copycat brands out there lately trying to mimic what 10 Barrel is doing in the outdoor space, no one puts their money where their mouth is like 10 Barrel. This year, they produced both a ski and a snowboard movie. The ski movie is Watch This, featuring Lucas Walks, and then they have Hold My Beer, a snowboard movie featuring Curtis Cizik. And the plan was for 10 Barrel to throw 3 hella big air events where they give away a ton of money and throw a huge party for everybody in attendance. Unfortunately, the final 2 events at Mount Bachelor and Mount Hood Meadows will be canceled. The good news is that even with all that we're going through, you can still drink beer outside. Next time you're at the store, pick up a 6-pack of Profuse Juice, a hazy IPA that I'm loving right now, and a beer that gives 1% of sales back to the Surfrider Foundation. Those are my sponsors. Now let's jump back into the podcast. I mean, you're on brands where if you go to the store and you're not sponsored by anybody, to buy a pair of shoes and buy a pair of jeans and maybe a shirt, you're probably going to buy Vans and Volcom, and now they're paying you to wear them.
Exactly. Yeah. Pretty wild. So I've been really, really lucky and really appreciative just of that.
And who pays you to ride today?
These days?
Yeah.
So Electric, K2, Volcom, Vans, Ninja Suit. I have Eastern Border as my shop sponsor. And yeah, Crab Grab, homie brands that I love and people that I love and respect. So, always try and support them.
Have you ever been dropped by a brand?
Yes, by Volcom. I was on the streetwear. They were shutting the streetwear sponsorship down and they're doing only outerwear. This was when I was on Forum and Foursquare. I was on Volcom just for clothing. But then, yeah, they're getting rid of that. Those days were over. So, yeah, it was cool to come full circle and get back on the team.
Okay. And one sponsorship or partnership, or I don't even know what it was for you, but it was interesting, was Red Bull, because you were associated with them for how many years?
A really long time. Since I was, I want to say, 15 years old. Jeff Regis, who was I don't know his exact title, but he was the marketing manager, sports manager for the East Coast. And he would sponsor the World Quarters at Waterville. And we met there and he started sponsoring me from a really young age, helped pay for the academy and got me traveling, got me into contests and a lot. So Jeff Regis did a whole lot for me back in the day.
Jeff Regis does a lot, but the brand itself creates a ton of opportunities for you over the years. In 2011, they set you up to break yourself off, really, but to break a world record quarter pipe. You get close, and then you end up decking and destroying yourself. When you look back at shit like that, was that a Red Bull thing where they wanted you to do it for their content, or did you really want to break this world record?
That one was interesting. That was something that, I came up with this whole plan And I really wanted to do that. It was right after I went to the Arctic Challenge and I got third, and Terry and Jake Blauvelt broke the world records. And so I went to Ryan Runke and presented it to him. But then it didn't happen for a couple of years. And in those couple of years, I exponentially got worse at riding quarter pipes. So, I still went for it. But yeah, I wasn't as strong of a quarter pipe rider by the time we actually did the project. And yeah, I paid the price for it. So it was definitely a lesson learned in you have to really want to do something and commit to it. Because I really felt it in my gut that I wasn't going to be able to do it. And I should have said no from the very beginning.
If you know you're not going to do it going into it, yeah, probably not a good idea to try.
Yeah, or, it's hard to say no. Like, I had this conversation with someone the other day where for a lot of us, the opportunities that are given to us maybe don't even feel like you deserve them, if that makes any sense. So to say no to something seems outlandish or just being cocky or whatever. Like, I've always felt like I have to say yes, and I have to try as hard as possible for all of my sponsors because I don't truly feel like I deserve what's been given to me. But yeah, learning to say no and recognizing that when you do say yes to things, to really commit and fulfill what you sign yourself up for.
Yeah. So Red Bull invests a lot in that for you. They invest a lot in the Blueprint series, which is a webisode series where you get to work with the legends in the sport telling their stories, which has to be awesome for you. They're also a brand that can help you when you're hurt. I think you took them up on that once. They can help you with money, produce content. They can do a shitload of things for you. But you end up leaving a sponsor that no one ever leaves. Why do you leave Red Bull?
I would say,
you invest in a water company coming up pretty soon after that. Does that play into it?
Well, yeah, definitely came into it. I would say that the opportunity was there to invest into Villager, our coconut water company, and we had just gotten done with St. Archer, the beer company.
Oh, you were involved in that?
Yeah.
Did you crush it with that? A lot of people did.
Yeah, I definitely didn't crush it like other people, but it was huge. A life-changing event for me. So there's a lot of motivation going into Villager. And really, there still is. It's actually pretty cool just being involved in the company and seeing how it has evolved and what direction we're at right now. But yeah, leaving Red Bull was pretty gnarly. And I think a lot of it had to do with what I wrote on Instagram. Like, I got to a point where I didn't really love what I was promoting and walked away from that. So I would say I definitely have regrets on how I voiced that and how I expressed it to the world. I feel like I was really voicing my opinion of the actual brand. But in reality, it's not really the brand. If you're in sports marketing, it's the people that are involved. They're the ones who are going to bat for you and creating these projects and these opportunities. And I think leaving Red Bull was definitely a learning experience for me, because kind of burning that bridge as I did, I definitely burned people that had done a lot for me over the years. So that's something that I regret.
Is that your biggest social media fuck up?
Yeah, probably. I wouldn't call it a fuck up, but I think it really showed me the power of the voice that you have.
Yep.
And that if you're going to put anything negative out to the world, there's going to have consequences to that. So yeah, that was just a big learning experience for sure.
You think about it now, you could have just been like, thank you for the past 10 years and I'm moving on to something else, and you don't burn any bridges.
Exactly. But those are parts of life that you maybe have to learn the hard way.
Yeah.
And that just is what it is. So, yeah.
So in your career at this point, you're on Volcom. They put out your movie, Mr. Plant. That's a nickname, but I'm not even going to talk about either of those. I'm going to talk about plants. Are you one that smokes weed, drinks a lot, parties? Is that in your wheelhouse, or what's your life like on that respect, if you're willing to talk about it?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely partied pretty good, especially during like the Form tours and Mr. Plant tour and all that stuff. I quit drinking a year and a half ago.
Whoa. Because it was a problem or because you just wanted to?
I would say, you know, it's a bigger answer than probably what I would share, but
Okay.
I would say I kind of felt like I was volunteering into this story that has already been told a million times. And it was actually through podcasts that I really kind of recognized that I didn't want to drink anymore and I wanted to put my energy and focus into better things. So yeah, just, you know, really listening to the Nine Club was huge. And a lot of the skaters that I look up to have had issues with partying and drinking and stuff like that. And during that time, I was actually in this detox anyways. My wife is a clinical nutritionist and she was helping me prepare for the winter. So I wasn't drinking. I cut out all these foods and things like that. So during that time, I kind of had an opportunity to look inward and think about what I wanted for the rest of my snowboarding career and just for life. And I think those podcasts really meant a lot for me, just kind of recognizing that I didn't want that same story. I didn't want to be that person to just tell the same story again. I could change that for myself right now. I didn't have to wait for something bad to happen. So yeah, kind of made the leap. It's been a year and a half and it's been really good for me. I feel great about it. I think the mental clarity and the physical aspects of it, especially now getting older, you know, like having a few beers after you snowboard, you definitely feel them a lot more than when you're 21 or whatever. So yeah, it's been a really positive thing in my life.
Yeah, there's something to be said for the healing power of podcasts. But back to your career, you do the X Games real snow thing while you're on Volcom. I think you're like 100% transition to the backcountry at that point. You get a silver and then a gold. Are those medals a big deal to you? I mean, were you growing up always wanting to win an X Games medal?
Yeah, those were huge. I think just being so invested into the video portion of snowboarding, to have kind of our part of snowboarding be highlighted by X Games and into the contest world was such a cool time and opportunity. And to actually win a couple medals was huge. The second to last year that we did it, we actually went to Summer X Games and stood on a podium and things like that. It was pretty incredible. And I pledged the money for the online voting part of it to my friend who is going through cancer treatment.
That's awesome.
And we actually won that. And I think that was more meaningful than the medal or anything like that. Being able to win that money for him. And yeah, that was huge. But yeah, we wouldn't have been able to do that without X Games and without Gunny and the whole crew understanding and encompassing filming.
And while everything should be perfect for you at this point in your career, you're doing well in video contests, you're putting out parts every year, you're on Volcom, and then Volcom decides they're not going to make snowboards anymore. Do you find that out at a good time, or is that like an October thing as well?
No, they gave us plenty of time to kind of figure things out, but it was a little bit vague. They had said that they probably weren't going to do the boards after a certain amount of time. So yeah, they gave us a couple of years really to kind of put the feelers out and see what opportunities were out there. And so for me, I've had this relationship with Tom Johnson, who's at K2 for a really long time, ever since he was at Eastern Border and then working for Matt Jaggerman back east. So ever since he got the job as the marketing manager for K2 Snowboarding, I just have always kind of chatted with him, and he's brought it up to me a couple of times. So when I knew for sure that the Volcom boards were going to be done, Tommy was the first person that I called, and really just worked out pretty amazing with the opportunities that he was getting for his program that he was building. So the timing was great on that end.
Looking at your sponsors, I mean, you've always had the coolest brands sponsoring you. When you go to K2, it's a different animal because K2 has a ton of history in snow, some riders who have really changed the game, but K2 is also a ski company. Are there any negatives to that?
I mean, zero negatives. The fact of the matter is K2's been making snowboards ever since I was born, basically since '87. So They've been in the game for a long time. They have plenty of skin in the game, and they've helped create a lot of careers for different pro snowboarders and have really backed people for a long time. So to me, I thought it was a good fit and an amazing opportunity. And ultimately, my entire family skis except for my mom. My mom snowboards, but yeah, my whole family skis, and they've never been able to take advantage of having me as a pro. So this last fall, I was able to order skis for my whole family, and that was pretty special too. But yeah, I had never been with a ski brand, but it certainly doesn't matter to me. So yeah, just the opportunity to work with some amazing people like John Colonna and Tim Sword, and now we have Jay Stone designing our boards. So we have a pretty amazing team on the snowboard side.
Nice. And bindings are also a big part of snowboarding. And right about the time that you got on K2, were you about to launch a pro model with bent metal?
Yeah. We had worked on a graphic, a colorway for bent metal. And unfortunately, I had to walk away from that. And I feel like that was probably bad timing on my end, on my part. The product was about to be released.
Ooh, with your name on it?
Yeah, with my name on it. Not as far as going into the stores, but as far as being released to the reps and things like that. So the company had already invested into creating this product. So definitely felt bad for walking away from that. But the opportunity that I had on the table from K2, it was too good of an opportunity to walk away from. And I just knew that that was the direction that I wanted to go.
So now you're on K2, you're filming for a Vans video, which you might have to stop filming for, I guess, because right now there's a virus out there that's going to kill the entire planet. Hopefully you and I will be left, but I'm sure there'll be more than us. But at this point in the show, I have something that I call inappropriate questions. And I get someone that you know to ask you 3 inappropriate questions. The guy that I got, he has another podcast. It's called The Snowboard Project. I don't know Mark Sullivan at all, but he was kind enough to put together 3 questions to ask you. I can't even remember what the questions were because we recorded them a while ago, but I will play you inappropriate question number 1.
Who is the best redheaded snowboarder ever? Is it Jay Cusick? Is it Shaun White? Nate Holland? Pat Moore? Pat Bridges? Who?
Oof. Man. I mean, I was just on a trip with Bo Bishop. He's incredible. I think Harrison Gordon is incredible. For those who remember, Andy Forgash was insane. Man, a lot of those people on the list aren't redheads. Bridges is not a redhead. Kuzik isn't. He's blonde.
I was thinking that when I heard that earlier. I was like, he's not a redhead.
Man, I'm going to say Harrison Gordon. He's one of my favorite people to watch snowboard, and yeah, he does it right for us gingers.
All right, there we go. We'll go into question number 2.
Would you rather quad 1800 Chad's Gap or catheter yourself with a cinnamon toothpick?
What?
So I guess you can look at it as literally, you're not going to land a quad 1800 anything. Would you want to just try that and destroy yourself on Chad's Gap, or try to catheter yourself?
100% Chad's Gap. Yeah.
But you might have to get cathetered after Chad's Gap.
At least I went out swinging.
All right, fair enough. We will go with your final inappropriate question.
If you had to have one tattoo removed, which one would it be?
Oh, man, whatever the least painful would be. I watched the video with Trevor Jacob getting some tattoos removed or whatever, and it looked terrible. I don't even know. I'm looking on my arm right now.
You have a lot of tattoos. Are all of them planned ones, or do you bozong anywhere? It's just like late night and someone's got a tattoo gun.
No, nothing like that. The only kind of sketchy one I got was in South Korea. Actually, tattoos are still illegal there. So it was kind of like this underground shop, but it was cool to have that story. I don't know. There's a couple of things I could just zap off, like this flower I'm looking at on my arm probably wouldn't suck too bad. But yeah, for the most part, I'd like to keep them.
All right. Who has the worst tattoo in snowboarding?
I would say Adam Kissel. I think he's at Copper Woodward. He was a big part of High Cascade back in the day, but he got LBT on his lower back in the High Cascade letters. And that was insane. But he's covered and it doesn't matter.
But you can still see it.
It is there to see. Yeah.
That's amazing.
But I was just thinking too, other redheads, Danimals. Man,
Yep.
he is an incredible snowboarder. So Danimals and Harrison Gordon, thank you guys for making us look good.
Well, I can have a redhead edit off at some point, but not any point soon because there is the virus. I want to thank you for your time. Listening to your story, man, you're like as humble as it gets, and everything's worked out for you. You have all the brands that like a 12-year-old me or a 12-year-old anyone in my age bracket would be like, I want to be on those when I get sponsored. But you got on all those, and then when they shut down, you got on better ones. So you've had an amazing career, and then your riding speaks for itself. And I'm sure you will get another chance at Alaska to ride it where you feel that you showed up.
I hope so. But yeah, I mean, as far as the sponsors go, I've been extremely lucky and it's been a lot of good people looking out for me. That's been the biggest part of my career is with anyone else's snowboarding career too. You know, it's not just about you and who you are, but the people that you surround yourself with and what they do for you. Yeah, so I've been super fortunate to have some amazing people help me out along the way.
So that was time with Pat Moore, and Pat is such a humble dude who has been killing it for such a long time on his snowboard. I don't think Pat really wanted to do this podcast. He doesn't seem like the type of guy who wants to put himself out there like this. He's more of a let the writing and other content do the talking kind of guy. But he told me he would do the podcast when I saw him at a K2 event in October or November. And he kept his word. Not everyone does that, so respect. Pat seems like a good dude, one that I would have liked to have a few beers with when he was into that, but I guess that won't happen now. I had originally scheduled this interview to go the week after the Jake Blauvelt interview, and I'm glad I didn't, because looking back on paper, Pat and Jake are very similar. Both are from the Northeast, both started with contests, both started on Burton, both switched to Forum, both switched from contests to focusing on video parts in the backcountry, both married a nutritionist, and both ended up on brands owned by K2. It's almost the same story, but totally different at the same time. So I'm glad Pat put me off for a while so he didn't have to go on after Jake. That's the show for this week. At this point, I want to thank you for listening, and I want to ask you to do a huge favor for me. I want you to rate me on iTunes. If you have an iPhone, here's what you need to do. Click the podcast icon, search for the Powell Movement, click my logo, scroll down until you see 5 stars, tap 5 stars, and you're done. It takes about 45 seconds, and really, everyone has the 45 seconds because we're on this lockdown. If you're in a state without a lockdown, well, please lock yourself down for at least a minute and do that review for me. If you're on an Android phone, I have no idea how to rate me, but hopefully you'll figure that out and email me the quick instructions at mike@thepowellmovement.com. Finally, I need to thank my amazing sponsors who make this show happen. They are Evo, 686, Stanley, and the 10 Barrel Brewery. Be safe and have a great week, everyone.